SquareX Pharmaceutical is offering qualified investors a chance to invest pre-IPO. We have a drug that improves immune response and thereby prevents cold sores. There is a realistic possibility, even I would say a realistic projection, that this investment could yield a 100-fold return on investment. $10,000 invested in SquareX has a very reasonable chance to turn into $1 million. I know your BS detectors are going off, but I think I can show later in this talk that that is actually a realistic projection. Now you're all big boys and girls. This is the disclaimer. Of course, we'll talk about financial projections. We'll talk about possibilities in the future. None of this is certain. You could lose all of your money, but you're all big boys and girls, so you understand that. Here's some of the highlights of the drug. We've got a drug that prevents cold sores. There's 50 million patients with cold sores per year in the United States alone. The drug works. There's just no doubt the drug works. No doubt in my mind, I should say. Of course, there is a possibility that it's not going to work in future clinical trials. But the drug works. It's been effective in 3 of 3 clinical trials through phase 2. We've had no serious adverse events. It acts just by training the immune system to respond better to the herpes virus that causes cold sores. Convenient dosing. It's applied topically, but to the arm, not to the lip or lesion. Just wear a patch for 2 to 6 hours once every 3 months. One dose lasts for 3 months. It can be taken during or between outbreaks. There's nothing else approved for the indication and nothing else even in clinical trials. We are in the late clinical stage. We've completed a phase 2 trial. We've had an end of phase 2 meeting with the FDA. We are offering pre-IPO. We're planning to go public later this year. We're offering pre-IPO to accredited investors stock at $3 per share for a limited time. There is a reasonable projection that it'll be worth 100 times that in 4 years when we get FDA approval, and I'll explain that and justify that later in this talk. Here's 3 takeaways. We've got statistically significant efficacy in 3 out of 3 clinical trials. So there's not much doubt, if any, that the drug works, and very low risk, comparatively low risk, that it will fail in phase 3 trials compared to other drugs. Huge market. 50 million people in the US have a cold sore outbreak each year. And first in class, and nothing else approved for the indication. There's nothing else in this class of drugs, nothing else that acts in the same way as our drug that's on the market or approved, and there's nothing approved for the indication of preventing cold sores. And we've got patent exclusivity to 2036, both for really the entire class of drugs and for the cold sore treatment market, or prevention market, I should say. As Liam Neeson would say, I've got a particular set of skills that made me suited for founding this company. I invented the treatment that caused the treatment behind this company, the treatment that prevents cold sores. I'm a PhD biochemist and a patent attorney. And equally importantly, I had frequent cold sores most of my life. And at the time I made this invention, I was having nearly constant cold sores. Then I took this drug, applied it on myself, and the cold sores almost immediately became much less severe. And then when I applied it again, they stopped completely. And I haven't had a cold sore outbreak in several years. That had never happened before in my life. For those of you who believe on betting on the jockey, also, I think I'm a pretty good jockey for this. I founded another company, IGF Oncology, off of a family of targeted cancer drugs I invented. And we've had a successful exit of that. We codenamed the drug SQX770. The active ingredient is squaric acid dibutyl ester. It is that small molecule shown on the right with the square shape, hence the name of the company SquareX. Again, it prevents cold sore outbreaks, topically applied, but to the arm, not to the cold sore or the lip, and convenient dosing anytime during or between outbreaks. One dose lasts 3 months, so you only have to take this 4 times a year. And we've had statistically significant measures of efficacy in 3 out of 3 clinical trials. In the phase 1, 3x longer time to the next outbreak than placebo. In the phase 2, 2.6-fold fewer outbreaks than placebo. And in the mechanism of action trial, we had significantly increased interferon gamma and other measures of immune response. So it just significantly improved the immune response to the herpes virus that causes cold sores. Our phase 1 clinical trial was conducted at Harvard University at Mass General Hospital. 43 subjects. The entry criterion was 6 or more cold sores that they'd reported they'd had 6 or more cold sore outbreaks in the previous 12 months. Double-blind, placebo-controlled study. Patients got either placebo or they got our drug. And the result was 3 times longer time to next outbreak. That p-value for that is 0.01, which means there's less than a 1% chance that that difference was not real, was due to just randomness. And a 99 or greater % chance that it's a real difference caused by the drug. Phase 2 trial, conducted again at Mass General and at Stanford University, 139 subjects. In this one, they reported they'd had 4 or more outbreaks in the previous 12 months in order to get into the trial. Again, double-blind, placebo-controlled. Got the active drug or they got a placebo. The investigators and the patients did not know whether they were on active drug or placebo. And the result was those on the real drug had 2.6-fold fewer outbreaks, and that result was statistically significant. P-value of less than 0.05, or less than a 5% chance that the difference was due to randomness. And the fewer outbreaks they got were also significantly less severe. Severity scale of 0.3 versus 1.3 in the placebo on a scale of 1 to 3, and that result was statistically significant. Our third clinical trial tested how this drug works. This is actually my favorite, probably, clinical trial that we've done. I get to get into the weeds on the science, but I'll spare you that for the most part here. So a couple of the key measures. The left column, what we did was we tested people who were infected with the herpes simplex virus type 1, HSV1, the virus that causes cold sores, but did not get outbreaks or got few outbreaks, 0 to 2 outbreaks in the previous 12 months. And then in the middle column, we've got sick patients, if you will, people with 6 or more outbreaks per year in the previous 12 months. And we drew the blood from these two groups, and we tested various immune parameters to see how the immune responded to the herpes virus. 2 of the important ones are highlighted in yellow. People with few outbreaks, they had higher T-cell activity against the virus in a dish. And they had 3 times higher interferon gamma expression. Interferon gamma is considered the most important antiviral cytokine. The healthy patients had 3 times higher interferon gamma expression than the sick patients. They also, on row 2, you'll see they had lower antibody expression, anti-herpes virus antibodies in their system. So this indicates that you want a T-cell response rather than an antibody response. I'll get to that when I get to the third column. So the third column then, we treated the patients, the sick patients, people who had 6 or more outbreaks, we treated them once with our drug on day 1 after we'd collected their blood on day 1. 56 days later, on day 57, we tested them again. We drew their blood and made the same tests. In every single one of these parameters, they became more like the healthy patients. They had higher T-cell activity. They had 11 times higher interferon gamma expression. There were 5 other immune genes that correlated with fewer outbreaks. They were higher in all of those. There were 2 other immune genes that lower expression correlated with fewer outbreaks, and they were lower in those. So in every single measure, they were improved, and in most of them, they were better than the people who were healthy and didn't get outbreaks to start with. They were, in a sense, better than well. Sorry, I meant to say that what's going on is that people who don't get outbreaks have a T-cell response to the virus instead of an antibody response. And people who get frequent outbreaks, their immune response is mostly antibodies and not T-cells. T-cells are the cells that are depleted in AIDS. So if you don't have T-cells, you're going to get infected with stuff and you're going to die. Antibodies you can more easily live without. So what our drug does basically is it shifts the immune response from an antibody response to a T-cell response. That's basically what happens. Our results were published in top journals: Journal of the American Academy of Dermatology, Journal of the American Medical Association Dermatology. All of the results on those 3 clinical trials have been published in peer-reviewed journals. Now let's compare our drug, the SquareX drug, SQX770, to Valtrex, the leading herpes and cold sore drug on the market. Valtrex is for treatment. It is for taking when you have an outbreak in order to lessen the duration of that particular outbreak. SquareX drug is for prevention. It's to prevent outbreaks from happening at all in the future. Prevention, of course, is better than treatment, so we're better in that regard. Dosing. The Valtrex is a pill, SquareX is topical, but Valtrex dosing is quite inconvenient. You need to take it in the first 24 hours of a tingle in order for it to have any effectiveness at all. So in that 24 hours, when you first have a tingle come on, you need to call the doctor, get a prescription, get it filled, go to the pharmacy, pick up the pills, and you got to do all that in the first 24 hours when you're maybe not even certain you've got an outbreak coming on. If you don't do that, it won't have any effect at all. SquareX dosing is more convenient. You can take it between or during outbreaks once every 3 months. Doesn't make a difference. Duration of episodes. This is what Valtrex does. It reduces the duration of episodes. It reduces the duration by about 2 days, from about 10 days to about 8 days, if you take it in the first 24 hours. If you don't take it in the first 24 hours, it doesn't even have that effect. We've not studied yet whether our drug reduces the duration of episodes of outbreaks. My bet is that it will actually do better than Valtrex on that. Frequency of episodes. That's the purpose of the SquareX drug. It reduces the frequency of outbreaks. It prevents outbreaks. Valtrex has no effect on the frequency of outbreaks. Severity of episodes. Valtrex's prescribing information specifically says it has no effect on severity of outbreaks. In our phase 2, we had a significant reduction on the severity of outbreaks. So we not only reduced the number of outbreaks, we also reduced the severity of the fewer outbreaks that happened. So I think the SquareX drug is simply better than Valtrex. And Valtrex is a billion-dollar drug. Now, it's not just cold sores. This drug, there's every reason to believe this drug will be effective for other diseases as well. I'm certain it's effective for genital herpes, and we've got lots of genital herpes patients who have been able to get a hold of this and have contacted us and said it worked great for them. We've got a patent on genital herpes. Yeast infection and vaginal yeast infections and fungal infections generally, we've got evidence to suggest it will be effective in those diseases, and we've got a patent pending. Molluscum contagiosum is a common viral skin infection, particularly in children. And we've got a patent pending on that, and we've got reason to believe there's evidence that it's likely to be effective in that disease. And common warts. We essentially know it's effective for common warts. That's not patented by us or by anybody, but when we get a drug approval, we'll capture the common warts market. So I said you could make a 100-fold return on your investment. I'm sure your BS detectors went off. So let's show how we calculated that. In this stock offering, we're offering stock at $3 per share. That's a company valuation of $22 million. We did a net present value calculation of the company that I'll show in the next slide that results in a valuation of the company of $119 million. That's right now. That's 5 times higher than we're offering this stock at. It's right now $119 million valuation, and that's with these assumptions that are all conservative. We only sell the drug to people who have 6 or more outbreaks. We have no sales to anybody with fewer than 6 outbreaks. Only half of those with 6 or more outbreaks take the drug, and they only take 2 doses per year instead of the recommended 4 doses. We only sell to people in the United States. We have no sales outside of the United States. Using a 30% discount rate, which is high and conservative, reflects more risk than I think there's actually is that this drug would not be approved. Assuming 4 years to get to FDA approval, and I think we can do that in 3 years, maybe even less than 3 years. And assuming only a 59% chance of FDA approval, which is the historical average for drugs that are going into phase 3 trials. In our case, we've had effectiveness in 3 out of 3 clinical trials, so I think we're probably at least the average and probably better than that. Personally, I think virtually certain that we'll get FDA approval, but don't quote me on that. Now, once we've got FDA approval, at that point the risk is taken out. The risk of not getting FDA approval is taken out. Once we've got FDA approval, a fair valuation of the company is $5.5 billion, 250 times the valuation we're selling stock at here. So, and that may be low. As it will be at that point a publicly traded company, the bottom line here, with the projected revenues we've got that I'll show in the next slide, the company value would be $14.7 billion at a PE value of 10 when we're at our peak revenue. So that's 670 times the current stock price. Okay, so here are the financial projections that I've used to come up with that projection that you can make 100x return on your investment. Some of the assumptions are in yellow. We've got 7 million patients. That's just the people in the US just with 6 or more outbreaks is that number. 50% of them are treated. Average number of doses per year is 2. We're assuming a price per dose of $135, which is, as you know, rather low for a prescription pharmaceutical that gives you 3 months, works for 3 months. So that's a conservative assumption. And then the top green line is total revenue with those assumptions. It peaks at $945 million. Then the next green line is after-tax cash flow, profits. That peaks at $168 million. And then the bottom green line is adjusted after-tax, probability adjusted after-tax cash flow. So we adjust the estimated profits, the cash flow, multiply that by 0.594, which is the likelihood of approval for phase 3 drugs in general. So we discount that, multiplying it by 0.594, and that gets you the cash flow in the bottom green line. 100% likelihood of the losses for the first 4 years. We're estimating 4 years to get FDA approval. And then 59% likelihood of the profits that result in the numbers in the years thereafter. And then the lower set of valuations in yellow, with a 30% discount rate, which again I think is kind of conservative, using the probability adjusted after-tax cash flow, the valuation of the company currently, right now, is $119 million. If we use the estimated after-tax cash flow instead of probability adjusted, it would be $225 million. So again, that's 5 times the current valuation and makes several conservative assumptions, including unrealistic conservative assumption that we don't have any sales outside the US and we don't have any sales to anybody who has fewer than 6 outbreaks a year. Now in 4 years, we'll have FDA approval. We hope to have FDA approval. I think we're going to have FDA approval in 4 years. So with using these numbers, starting from year 4, once we've got FDA approval, now we've eliminated the risk that we're not going to get FDA approval. So at that point, we have a smaller discount rate, and we don't have the losses for the first 4 years. They've already happened. So the discount rate now is 15%. And using the after-tax cash flow, no longer probability adjusted because now we've already got FDA approval, gives you a valuation of $1.38 billion. About 50 times, more than 50 times the price you're buying at. The 15% discount rate is probably a little conservative, but anyway, that's realistic. But the idea that we wouldn't have any sales to people with 1 to 5 outbreaks or any sales outside the US is unrealistic. So we double it again. We have, assuming reasonable assumption would be equal sales to people with 1 to 5 outbreaks as the people with the far larger number of people with 1 to 5 outbreaks, as in the people with 6+ outbreaks. So we double the profit numbers. And then another reasonable assumption would be an equal amount of sales outside the US as inside the US. In fact, that's a conservative assumption, but let's assume equal amount outside the US as in the US. That doubles the profits again. So then the valuation is $5.52 billion in 4 years when we have gotten FDA approval, but have not gotten any sales of drug yet. That's 250 times the valuation you're buying at. But even that may be too conservative. At these peak numbers, again with multiplying the actual numbers in the table by 4, as I just did, assuming a PE of 10 as a publicly traded company, at our peak revenue, we would have a valuation of $14.7 billion. And that's still a little conservative in that we're not including any sales for genital herpes, any sales for warts or fungal infections or any other diseases. Just sales for oral herpes or cold sores, $14.7 billion, 670 times the current valuation of the price of the valuation that you're buying stock at today. So there really is, it is not pie in the sky. It's really quite reasonable that you could get a 100-fold return on your investment. One way of looking at this is if you buy stock now, you're making a bet that we are able to get FDA approval. And historically, 59% of drugs at this stage get FDA approval. And I think our odds are at least that good. So you're making a bet that more than 50% likelihood you're going to win that bet. If you win that bet, we calculate here, your return would be 100x, maybe about 100x. It's got to be like at least 20x. So you're making a bet that you've got more than 50% chance of winning, and if you win, you get 20 times your bet back. You're not going to find that opportunity in gambling anywhere else. You're not going to find that opportunity in investment anywhere else. Or if you do, I would definitely suggest you take it. And I'd suggest you take this. Here's our team. I'm the founder and CEO. As I mentioned, I'm a PhD biochemist and a patent attorney, 18 scientific journal articles, 21 issued patents as an inventor, and I founded another successful biotech, and we've had a successful exit of that. Our chief financial officer is Konstantin Kardaras. He is a CPA and an MBA and has experience with public biotech companies. Tom Horn was my co-founder, and he is the former executive director of the American Board of Dermatology. He was, in a sense, the top dermatologist in the country. And he's connected with Harvard, so he's an adjunct professor at Harvard, so he helped us get into the clinical trials at Mass General. Dr. Dudek used to be our chief medical officer. He's still on our board. He's a practicing physician and founded another oncology startup. And Kathleen Littrell is our clinical trials manager. And here's our board. We've got a strong board. All 3 people on the right column here are current or former CEOs or chief financial officers of publicly traded biotechs. So we've got a good board, I think, with deep public company biotech experience. To date, we've raised $6 million, and we've used that very wisely. We've achieved a lot with that. We've got 4 U.S. patents and patent coverage out to 2036 at least, other patents pending, foreign patents issued in those same 4 families in most of the major markets in the world. We've completed preclinical testing and toxicology. We've completed the 3 the 3 clinical trials I talked about, and we've had our financials audited in preparation for an IPO. What we're using with this money for is to go public. We filed an S-1, which is the document you file with the SEC to go public. That was reviewed and approved, but we've withdrawn it now to do this offering privately. But we plan to go public later this year, list on the NASDAQ. We need to do plan to do a phase 2 bridging trial. That's the way we're going to dose this drug is with a dermal patch, a Band-Aid type thing that you would apply on your arm. That's not the way we've dosed it in our clinical trials before, so we're doing that in a bridging trial, but there's not really any particular risk. It's just to test this Band-Aid. And then when that's completed, we'll do phase 3 trials where we'll follow patients for 12 months and then file the new drug application for FDA approval. So again, the key takeaways, I think there's a very realistic possibility you could get a 100-fold return on your investment from this, that $10,000 could turn into $1 million. There's no other opportunity. I don't believe there's any other opportunity in pharmaceuticals where you've got a drug that's been effective in 3 out of 3 clinical trials through phase 2, enormous indication with 50 million patients in the US alone, and no other drug approved for the indication or even in clinical trials. So we're in a 1-mile race and we're 3/4 down the track and nobody else has even started. So thank you, and feel free to contact me if you're interested in investing. I'd be happy and thrilled to talk to you about it. Thanks.